a civilian passenger jet, a military helicopter, an air traffic controller, and a mystery plane? Who's at fault? A CRJ civilian passenger jet and an Army Black Hawk helicopter crashed over Washington, D.C. This is what we know, but what we don't know are the finer details like what caused the collision, why a military helicopter and a civilian jet would even be flying that close to each other, and the obvious question, who is at fault? We have a pretty solid lead, so let's dive in and conduct our own investigation. The details are scattery, but the two aircraft involved in the crash were a CRJ-701ER operated by PSA Airlines, whose parent company is American Airlines, and sadly the 60 passengers and 4 crew on board are all presumed dead. It took off from Wichita, Kansas and was scheduled to land in Washington, D.C. The other aircraft was an Army UH-60 Black Hawk helicopter carrying 3 crew members on board, and they too perished. By virtue of the fact that Washington, D.C. is the capital of the United States, and this is where the president lives, it already makes this airspace extremely tricky to understand, much less navigate. Ronald Reagan Washington National Airport is situated along the main waterway just across from the American Capitol buildings on the other side of the Potomac River. This broad area is covered by a restricted airspace called Class B. These designations are usually reserved for the busiest airspaces in the United States, and contained within that Class B airspace is another no-fly zone over the National Mall, so you can see that there are multiple players involved in this dicey game of aviation Russian roulette. Air traffic controllers must be alert at all times to direct aircraft away from these airspaces and each other. As the airplane approached the airport for landing, air traffic controllers asked them to switch from runway 1 to runway 33. Now there's nothing quite out of the ordinary yet, and air traffic controllers often do this to keep planes separated to avoid collisions in the airspace. The pilots understood the runway change and agreed to land. It was all clear until the Army Black Hawk entered the airspace. Now, 2 things entered my mind when I heard military aircraft flying at night in the nation's capital. 1, it's most likely impossible to see with the naked eye, but 2, luckily, with all the technology on board and in that area, there's no way anything catastrophic could ever happen. Well, I was wrong. Dead wrong. No pun intended. And if you were thinking the same, you were too. But what was this helicopter doing there at this time of night? This helicopter wasn't some random aircraft traversing the airspace. It was operated by the Priority Air Transport Department of the U.S. Army. And just like the name suggests, they are normally designated to transport high-ranking government officials, such as Army generals and the like. Now, after further investigation, it was revealed that this helicopter was on a training flight operating out of a military base just southwest of the capital. Now here's where the problem occurred, and listen carefully because this is very important. All aircraft flying within restricted airspace, especially Class B airspace, are required to have an ADS-B transponder. These transponders use a global positioning system to transmit the location of the aircraft at all times, so air traffic control can track and direct all aircraft within the airspace. But before ADS-B, aircraft were equipped with a Mode C transponder, which provided much of the same information but with a lot less detail. The other benefit of ADS-B is that this system is highly effective in the fact that all other ADS-B equipped aircraft can see each other in space. This type of technology isn't available with Mode C transponders. So why would the Black Hawk try to be invisible at night in Washington, D.C.? It's pretty simple. When you think about it, the US military can choose when they want to turn off their ADS-B transponders. And as you might have guessed, this is mainly for homeland security or law enforcement purposes when they want to keep their location in space a secret. Now we start to get a clearer picture of the initial cause of confusion. Right before the crash, the helicopter was basically a flying projectile in the night sky because it was transmitting in Mode C. Couldn't the CRJ avoid them once they saw them? Don't they have collision software on board? Another technical issue uncovered was that the collision systems on both aircraft that tell the pilot when it's too close to another object were inhibited because they were flying under 1,000 feet. This really drives home the reality of just how close they were to touchdown when this tragedy happened, and were most likely already texting friends and family that they would be on the ground soon. But as we peel back the layers of the onion, here's where it gets even more dicey. Does the air traffic controller carry some blame? You might be asking, well, how could that be possible if the helicopter was intentionally invisible at night? I swear that there's so much going on up there that it's no wonder that there aren't more air accidents. Air traffic controllers control two types of aircraft: instrument flight rules aircraft and visual flights rule aircraft, VFR. An aircraft flying in instrument flight rules follows the air traffic controller's commands and does not deviate, especially when there may be poor weather, when pilots may not be able to see past the nose of the airplane. This makes for a safer, more economical, and comfortable flight. There's no guessing over here. And on the other hand, visual flight rules aircraft operate under different parameters and in less congested zones. Air traffic controllers have enough on their plate, so this is designed to allow free rein in lesser restricted airspaces, where the pilot has clear visibility and doesn't need to ask permission to deviate their course. Think about smaller, more private aircraft or news and traffic helicopters. But let's not get it twisted. Air traffic controllers still command the airspace, and if need be, they can tell any aircraft what to do for the safety of their passengers and others in the air and on the ground by extension. Now, this is where we have to make the determination of who is at fault. Right before the collision, the helicopter is performing its training maneuvers along the Potomac River, and it appears the helicopter is operating as a VFR aircraft. And that's very important to remember. The air traffic controllers realized what was happening and asked if the helicopter had the CRJ in sight. He replies that the CRJ is in sight, so naturally he would be expecting the aircraft controller to guide the CRJ away from them. But tragically, 10 seconds later, as the passengers' families were awaiting a "we've just landed" text, they were about to see an explosion and receive the horrible news of their loved one's demise. But shockingly, we now know that the Black Hawk was possibly flying outside of its approved flight plan for a time period and also flying higher than 300 feet, way above its allowed altitude of 200 feet. Whoa. But what no one noticed until recently is the presence of a third aircraft in the area, which the Black Hawk could have mistaken for the CRJ a few miles away after asking for separation. I mean, who really knows at this point? But the most shocking revelation is that the air traffic controller communicating with the airplane and the helicopter was doing the job normally handled by two people. Apparently, this is normal practice when nighttime traffic is at a certain level. So who's at fault here? Is it the Black Hawk pilot operating with the less optimal navigation system? Is it the civilian airplane? Or could it be the air traffic controller, him one, handling the responsibilities of two people? Wow, this really makes me not want to fly again for a while. Truly a sad ending straight out of a novel or Lifetime movie. Hey, I have loads more content like this. But first, you have to like and subscribe.